And so they can see you, Mario, on the big screen, and you're seeing them in the classroom, although I realize it's not great quality, but that's the classroom. And I'm up at the podium, but we can't hear you, Mario.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much.
Great. Okay. So let me start sharing my screen. Do let me know if y'all can see my screen or not. So.
Yes, we can.
Great. So yeah, let me go ahead and I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, Dr. Hinojosa, for allowing me to come and meet with all of y'all today. I really am grateful for the opportunity to kind of touch base with y'all. This course I know is very critical to your overall success within your dissertation, in the sense that, as Dr. Hinojosa mentioned, that your literature review is a critical element of that dissertation. Your chapter 2 is pretty much the basis of really much your whole research study. So it really is invaluable. Right now, I know y'all are doing your PDLRs, but eventually that is going to, like Dr. Hinojosa mentioned, that's going to translate to your full literature review. So what I'm hoping to do today is kind of give y'all a primer, a good overall introduction to how you would approach this research process, in the sense of navigating our library databases, particularly, and how you would approach some search strategies in terms of active searching within the databases for scholarly literature. Depending on the scope of your topics, on the range of your different variables that you're looking at, you might have to use multiple databases, you might have to use multiple search terms. So what I'm going to try to do is kind of show you how to basically go about those processes, how to enable those actual searching strategies as you're going along. So let me go ahead and start sharing. I have my screen shared, but let me go to our first slide here. So the research process itself, I know many of y'all probably have seen this process either in undergraduate or even your graduate work, but it doesn't change really when you get to your doctoral level. It's very straightforward in the sense of how you would go about approaching it from a discovery interface looking into the library databases. You would have your refined research question. Basically, that would basically stem from your concept proposals to where you're actually translating those into your actual full dissertation, actual, what you're looking in terms of your variables. So really, once you have your refined research question, that's going to lead to the conceptual thinking about what concepts are you exploring, what ideas, what populations, what subjects are you basically bringing out about that in a very conceptual basis, first of all, because that helps you kind of think about charting keywords that you're going to be used to generate within the databases. Once you've done that, you kind of want to formulate your synonyms, which is that third step. The databases require active vocabulary, controlled vocabulary. So sometimes terminology is very critical to what it's your success in terms of retrieving good search results. It's not going to be like Google. It's not going to be anything like that where you type in natural language and you're going to get anything what you want back. Google will do that. It'll give you natural language search, but you may not always get what you need back. You may get some relevant results, but you're not going to get that. And usually most of the times, past the first page of Google, you don't get anything really that you can use. So databases are different. By the keywords themselves, they're going to give you defined scholarly journal articles that are going to basically be able to use in your actual your chapter 2, and it'll actually have you access to literature reviews or meta-analysis as well within that scope. So you want to make sure you're formulating synonyms for best practice, to try to think about additional terms that you may be able to substitute in the event you need to revise your search. Most probably you will have to revise the search. So once you've done that, you want to select your relevant databases. This is a question I get often asked by students, that what databases do I use to search for, or what databases do I select in terms of my topics? Basically, that is really, in a sense, dependent upon the subjects that you're exploring. Some databases are going to have multiple subjects in them, and some databases are going to have specialized topics or specialized themes where they're only going to be covering certain content. So you want to make sure you're bringing in as much overlap as possible across those databases when you're searching to initially expand your search. You don't want to narrowly think about it so very quickly when you're doing your literature search. I know you want to get to exactly what you want to get, but you have to think about it very broadly first, and then narrowly define your search terms to get to a more refined sense of what your terms are coming up in terms of your topics. Then you'll start basically constructing your searches using your Boolean operators. Those are your and, or, and not. Those are going to be used to connect or separate your concepts. Once you do that, you'll revise and modify your search terms. Like I said, more than likely, you're not going to get it on the first time. You're not going to get it on the second time. You might have to revise your search a couple of different times to get what you need. Depending on the amount of variables that you're looking at, in respect to your independent and your dependent variables, you might have your additional control variables that you have to consider as well. So just keep that in mind, that you want to make sure you have a strong connection first, and then you can start looking at possibly additional terms or additional concepts. Then your last stage is pretty much your compilation stage, your archiving of your research, basically saving your research articles, saving your citations, basically making sure that you categorize them based by the themes that you're looking at in your literature review. So your literature review is going to serve the basis of trying to identify the prominent literature that's being discussed around your topic, but it's not going to be inclusive of everything that's been discussed in terms of your actual research focus. It's just the most relevant research that's in regards to that. And then you're also looking for identification of gaps within the literature, things that are not been discussed, ideas or subjects or concepts that haven't been brought out fully. Those are the things that you're looking for within the actual literature review section. So this is very general. The only reason I put these questions, y'all have your topics, I know more than likely right now, but the only reason I bring this slide up is in the sense that when you're doing your searching, these are the questions I keep asking myself as I'm looking through literature. Why is this important? How is this helping me to prove or disprove what I want to look at? How is it basically relevant? The interest, what am I interested in? That's more so your relevance. Is the article relating exactly to what you're looking at? And if it's not relating exactly to you or what you're looking at, is it partially looking at what you're trying to discuss? Because it might still be of some benefit. The last one is how your research will add to the discussion. At the doctoral level, you're constantly going to be thinking about how your research is going to impact other research. So what your study is going to do in contributing to the overall impact of the whole research cycle in a sense of this actual issue or this actual topic will lead to the ability for other people to replicate some part of your research or try to do your research in a different scope. So you might want to build on previous research, or you might want to go in a completely different way to where you're creating your own original research concepts. This is the most important aspect in a sense of identifying your databases. Like I mentioned earlier, these are your prominent databases that you will be using within leadership studies. This is not exclusive of all the databases that you would be using, but it's the most, I guess I could say, the most accessible ones that you probably will be using more frequently. Academic Search Complete, JSTOR, Science Direct, these are all multidisciplinary databases. Your subject databases are Business Source Complete, Business Abstracts, LexisNexis Uni. Research methods, these are all methodology databases. This is to help you more within and formulating your methodology. That goes more into your chapter 3. And then more in going into your data analysis aspect when you're running your actual SPSS data analysis at that end of in that actual cycle after you've compiled your data and you've actually got all your data to review. So this will be more so relevant for those purposes. Your mental measurements, like I mentioned, this will be more relevant for your instrument selection. If y'all have instruments already, y'all might already know what you're going to be using or thinking about what you might be using. But this will basically be used for those purposes at that point. So like I said, those each of the databases have specified purposes, and they're going to address specific actual content. So knowing which ones to select is going to help you in a sense to when you're doing your exploration. And I'll show you when we do our demonstration how that's actually in practice. I'm going to briefly touch upon your Boolean operators. This is the and, or, and not terms. Like I said, they just relate and combine your concepts, and they directs the database. Like I said, without these operators, you're not going to find what you really need. This is meant to basically combine your concepts or basically expand your concepts. So and is going to be used to narrow your search results. Naturally, you combine your one concept with another concept and another concept. You're narrowly dividing your actual search. Or is going to be used to expand your search results because you're saying the database, let's say if I want to look at a particular leadership theory, I could use authentic leadership, but I could also use authentic leadership theory, or I could use authentic leadership style, or I can use authenticity of the leader. Those are 4 different synonym-based ways that I could expand my search out using the same terminology. But I'm not being just using one term and saying this is the only term I can use, because those are all synonyms. They're all relevant. So you want to use that in terms of when you're doing your initial search. Not most sometimes you probably won't be using this, but sometimes you might want to exclude terms in your search results. There's certain things that you don't want to come up in a search. You might want to use the not operator for that purpose. Are there any questions about that first general aspect of it, or if there's anything that I was clear? Because then what I can try to do is I can kind of go into our databases and show y'all how to go about that process.
I just had a quick question.
Sure.
Regarding the Boolean operators,
Mhm.
parentheses, is that something also that it respects?
So what you're doing when you're using parentheses or like parentheticals, it's a different types of they're called different they're not technically Boolean operators. They're actual
Like order of operation kind of thing?
yeah, they're like indicators to the database. So like if you put something in quotation, what basically it tells the database is that you're looking for that precise term and only that term. I do recommend you doing that if there's like a term that there's really no substitute for. And that's the only term that really originates. It's also important if you're trying to relate individual concepts. Like, say you have a group of 1 subjects that you're looking at or concepts, and you're trying to relate that to another group. You start using parentheticals, and you will put your that grouping of terms in 1 parentheses. And basically, when you put something in parentheses, what it's telling the database is, I want you to find all of these terms that are not in parentheses in relation to the terms that are in the parentheses. So I could show you how that looks in practice, but just think of any time you put something in parentheticals, it's telling the database that I don't want you to directly look at this term first. I want you to look at the other terms in relationship to that term. So it's telling the database a little bit in the sense that I want you to look at all of this before you look at this. And that way it knows that you're trying to look for an actual, you're trying to direct the database back to a singular term or a singular group of terms. That's when you use the parentheticals. But the quotations are for precise terminology. You can use them. I would say just use them sparingly because sometimes you might exclude some information that might be helpful by using the quotations. So try it with and without and see how it alters your search results.
So with
That's
us,
a good question though.
like a term like transformational leadership,
Yes.
it's common to see that together as one thing. And so sometimes you run a search without the double quotes, and you
Mhm.
get those 2 words in there, but they're not necessarily referring to transformational leadership. You know what I mean? It's got like,
Yeah, no, exactly. But see, if you put quotations around transformational leadership and you only have that one term in your search fields, only thing it's going to bring in, it's only going to bring in articles that show transformational leadership, just that term. But it may not bring in articles that say transformational leadership theory or transformational leadership style. It's going to exclude those search results because you're precisely saying, I just want transformational leadership, just those 2 words.
oh, okay.
And so you might not bring in other search results that might be still relating to transformational leadership. So that's the reason why if you're going to do it with quotations, you can kind of do transformational leadership quotations or transformational leadership theory quotations, transformational leadership style quotations. Because it's going to look for that precise term for each of those actual terms. It's going to only look for those in quotations. But that's generally how you use quotes. And I can show you how we can experiment with that as we start doing our active search. But that's actually a really good question. Were there any other questions?
Anybody else have a question?
Thank you, Mario, for that.
Yes, you're welcome. So let me go ahead and I'm going to segue to our databases. Let me escape out of here. Let me bring up my browser. So this is our library database, one search page. This is the main URL for our library, library.ollusa.edu. Whenever time you are accessing it off campus from an off-campus link here from the main essay campus, you always want to make sure you're logged in first into the full site. So you want to come here to that proxy link here. It's going to prompt you usually for your OLLU username and password. Once you enter that OLLU username and password, it should give you an authenticated message here saying you're currently logged in. That means now you have full access to everything within the site. If you are idle for about 15 or 20 more minutes, 20 minutes, and you're not on the page, you might be logged out. You might need to re-log back in. But if you're currently working through the databases or you're accessing anything actively, it's not going to log you out. It's just if you haven't looked at anything, you haven't touched anything, then the page might just log you out because it doesn't think there's any activity on it. So basically, once you're logged in, you can come back to this library homepage here. I don't recommend y'all using OneSearch at y'all's level. That's going to be something for more so just general discovery, any other types of sources. It does have a dissertation link there that you can search solely for dissertations, so it is a benefit for that purpose. There is an article link that you can use there. The only reason I don't recommend you using that is because the articles that are found in OneSearch are a sampling of the index articles that are in the databases. So it's not bringing in the full amount of potential articles that you can actually get. That's why for purposes of when you're doing scholarly research, you want to make sure you go directly to your databases. Here you go to your database A to Z finder. All our databases are alphabetized by first letter right here at the top, and you can sort by those actual letters, but you could also filter by subject. So if you want to come to a particular discipline, you could look to see what databases are used there. If I wanted to come to leadership studies, these 18 databases are the most prominently used databases within leadership studies. Like I said, they're not exclusive of everything that you could use, but these are the ones most likely that you're going to be consulting the most or be using in a most effective manner. So it's got a good cross sampling of different topics. You have ERIC, you have legal databases, you have governmental databases, and then you have psychological databases. And you have some sociological databases down there, SOC Index. I always recommend students first start their search in academic search, just because it's the biggest multidisciplinary database. It just has a lot more, a larger repository of scholarly journal articles that are available in it. So it's something that's really good to get started with using that one and then adding additional databases as you go on. So if I open that there, it'll bring us into the Ebsco Host platform. This is the provider basically of the database. And then it brings up your fields right here where you can actually select options, where you can actually select a field by a particular type of terms. You could use keywords here. You could use subject terms, you can use an actual precise title or just all text if you want to. You could tell the database where you want to find some of that information as well too, if you want to find it by a specific geographic term, or if these are the keywords that are supplied by like an author. I don't usually recommend you doing that first time. I always leave it as optional, and or if I were to use anything, I would just have it as all text. But those are options that are available in those drop downs that you can be more precise in your searching. So what I want to do here is, like I said, when you're translating what you're doing to these actual search interface, you kind of want to bring out what those individual concepts are from your actual research focus. So what you should be thinking about it conceptually is, what is my independent variable? What is my dependent variable? What are my population? How are those three things combined first? And trying to find that first strong connection, and then you would start thinking about considering control variables. You bring in gender, you bring in age, you bring in ethnicity, whatever you want to look at solely. But you want to make sure you have a strong relationship first with your independent and your dependent variable first. And then you can start exploring outside that realm. What I'm happy to do at this point is I'm happy to take any of y'all's topic to use as an example if anyone wants to volunteer theirs.
Volunteer.
Okay.
Authentic leadership and organizational commitment.
Okay. Leadership and organizational commitment.
Authentic leadership.
Okay. Are you looking at a particular population?
Yes, And educators?
Educators. Okay. And are these educators at primary, secondary level?
I did not select either. I don't want to narrow my search too much.
Okay, well, we can leave it very general first, and then we can
Okay.
try to go with that. So
Okay.
like right there, I already kind of look at that in terms of I have an independent variable, I have a dependent variable, and then you have a selected population, which are the three usually components that you need to get your search started. So what at this point, what I would do here is, mind you, we're only searching one database. We'll expand it out a little bit more if we need to, but let me go ahead and put authentic leadership. You'll notice as I start typing this in, you start getting auto suggestions. Really look at those auto suggestions because some of those actual suggestions may be helpful and you might want to experiment with some of them. Like I said, what I try to do initially is I expand my search out to be as big as possible and broad as possible. I'll select usually this thread here, like authentic leadership style or theory. And then I'll have that as that main term there in that first heading. It doesn't matter what order you put the terms in. It's just for your own benefit. Where do you want to remember where you have your associations?
Okay.
You can bring in your organizational commitment. So like right here, you'll see that you get other suggestions here. You'll get organizational commitment, you'll get organization, a different type of spelling here of organizational commitment, and then you'll get another one in terms of employee commitment. So while you might not think employee commitment may be the term I want, it's still going to regard whether you look at that employee, it's going to bring it within an organizational context. So you might want to select a term like that because naturally the employee is going to belong to some type of organization. So you're going to bring that in terms of your searching. So that's why they group them in that type of manner, because it still has partial relevance to what you're looking for in terms of terms. So I'm going to go with that first here. I'm not going to add our educators yet. What I want to do is first to see what this relationship is in terms of what we're getting in terms of results. We're only searching one database, so we may not get a ton, but that's fine. That's good for demonstration. Yeah, like I imagine we only got 12 articles. Okay, so but we're only searching one database here. So I don't panic. I don't start thinking, oh my God, I don't have enough information. No.
You don't
guess
panic, Mario, but
guess
these guys panic.
No, and then I can
Switching
imagine
your
that
question.
if y'all see that and you're like, oh my God, there's only 12 articles. Oh my God, what am I gonna do? No, I mean, trust me. If you expand this out to include additional databases, your results are going to come up. So like if I come here to choose databases, I'm looking for relevance now. Particularly, I want to bring in things that I know where the leadership theory is going to be explored, and I know where that organizational commitment is going to be explored. So I'm going to bring in business source. I'm going to bring in business abstracts. I'm going to bring in ERIC. That's an education database. You'll bring in that one. You might want to bring in something within government. You might want to bring something in professional development, one of those. And all you're basically looking for here is any type of overlap where it might have relevance to your topic. You definitely want to bring in your psychological databases, like psych articles, psychology, behavioral sciences collection, PsycInfo. Let's see here, maybe a sociological database, maybe something with like this, teacher reference center. Since you're dealing with a defined educational focus, you want to make sure you bring in anything that has educational relationships. And I'm just taking a sampling here. This is just the ones that I'm choosing to use. You can choose other ones if you feel like you want to try and experiment with those. So if I hit OK here, I'm going to come back up and I'm going to rerun our search. So it goes back up. It's still not a ton.
There you go. Okay.
But it's still more. It's still more. So what you have a little bit more to work with. But what you'll start seeing is that you start getting some things that pop up in your search as dissertations. So you're getting a lot of dissertations there, but you are getting an actual organizational commitment. This is something that I've noticed in the sense of like looking at the organizational commitment dynamic. If you're using that as a dependent variable, what you might want to do is organizational commitment has its own components. So sometimes what you might want to do is if you're feeling like you're not getting enough under the main overall overarching subject, you can separate that by its components and you can search for those individual components by themselves. Here they're looking at the role of effective commitment. So it's worthwhile to pursue it in that respect too, and looking at it in its separate components and doing it as an overall general search. You still haven't brought in fully your population, but you can bring that in as well too. But what you're doing here first is you're first trying to see what am I showing, what is anything that's coming up that potentially that I might use. Now I am seeing a good amount of dissertations, but they may not be fully bringing in your population or to the scope of what your population is looking at. So right here, all you're doing is you're looking and seeing what is being discussed, and all you're looking for is relevance. It may not fully bring in your population, so you can try seeing, okay, well, what if I add my population here? What if I add educators? Okay, let me go back up to here. And I would try to choose something like this, educators or instructors or teachers. And it's going to naturally come down, but like remind you, 9 articles, we could still use other databases, we could still use other terms. So right here, I didn't use other terms here. I could use authenticity or leader authenticity, or I could use right here, I could use commitment within organizations, or I can use commitment as an overall general thing and then put in the whole organizations. Here's an other way to think about this too. Organizational commitment can be subdivided into its own 2 separate terms. If I did this, let me show you what I'm going to do here. Cut here, I'll paste this here. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring in the organizational context first, and then I'll bring in the commitment factor. Organizations, since we're not looking at, you're bringing in organizations, corporations, or businesses, or institutions, or government. Those are all different types of organizations, whether they be for-profit or non-profit. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the actual commitment aspect or engagement. Make sure I get that spelled right. Let's see, commitment or engagement. So it's kind of like what you're kind of thinking about in terms of terminology is can't get so set on the term commitment. You have to think about other terms that are what are synonyms of commitment, or what are other things that are basically show what commitment is. So it could be engagement, or it can be anything really. Naturally, these search results should go back up, and it did. It goes up a little bit. But now you're starting to see, am I finding something a little bit more differently here? Personal school factors, meaning real school engagement, and determine the student leadership skill, structured education model. There's perception of authentic leadership, authentic classroom management in public and private sector universities. But you're looking for anything that shows up in bold, and you're looking for your populations, 6,975 university leaders, teachers. So once you start seeing if you're finding anything that's showing that even there's touching upon the relevance that you're looking at, that's something potentially you can use, and you have a starting point. Like this one could be something that potentially could be helpful because this is coming from Eric. I could look at this in the education database. I would look at the abstract, but I would also try to see where this is available in full text. And it basically redirects you back here. The one thing I would say is make sure when you're looking at this, look at the little descriptive terms that are always included in each article. Like this has instructional leadership, classroom today, public sector, private sector. So when you're searching, you might want to substitute some of those terms. You might want to use public sector or private sector, public colleges, 4-year university colleges, or 4-year institutions, 2-year institutions. Try to experiment with some of those terms. If you're still leaving it very broad, but as you get more specific, you start saying, oh no, I only want to look at post-secondary, or I want to look at, primary school. I want to look at those levels. The terms themselves are going to basically affect all of that. The leadership effectiveness, organizational development, leadership qualities. Like you're looking at authenticity of the leader, but you not necessarily always have to look at that authentic leadership term. You could just look up leadership theory, and then you can bring out that authenticity as a subtopic, authentic or authenticity. and basically do what I did there, subdivide it a little bit more, and then you might bring in more relevant results. Are there any questions about that so far, or anything that's a little bit confusing?
So Mario, I just have one comment. Can you go to the screen if you can, if you still have or actually right there.
Mhm.
So when we have our students do searches, and as you're indicating the population, really our thought is if you have too many articles, then we actually have a problem, because we don't want, we're trying to do independent research, but we're trying to contribute to the body of knowledge. So
Exactly.
if we were to do this search as you have it set out right now, and we had 150 articles, then our advice to a student would be to pick another population or another topic, because now we already know too much about it. So it's just a good point to make, that it really, when you get super specific and include the population from which you're gonna pull your sample, then we're hoping you're not gonna find too much.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to have too much that's discussed, and it's exactly looking at the exact relationships that you're looking at in the exact same way, because then it's just derivative. And you don't want that naturally to occur. What you're looking for in any of those actual articles is you're looking for relevance, but only in the respect that it supports what you're looking at in the sense of what you're trying to do in your study. So like if it's going to be something to where, oh, I'm not getting a lot of this, or I'm not seeing a lot of this term show up, well, there's partially, yeah, you could be limited in search results because there's just not a lot that's been discussed, or that topic hasn't been actually researched in a big extent, which is a good thing. Or it could be, like I said, you're not using the correct terms, you're not using the right keywords to basically search, and so you're limiting your search. But after I've done this type of search where I've expanded my search out a couple ways, I could kind of feel assured that, oh, well, I've done my due diligence in trying to expand this out a little bit more. Let me look at some of the ones that are in here that might be relevant, but if they're touching upon exactly what I'm looking at, maybe at that point, like Dr. Hinojosa mentioned, you might want to think about revising your topic a bit. Is it too similar to another dissertation, or is it too similar to a couple articles that have already been written on this? That's generally a good rule of thumb, is trying to look through it. And all I'm looking for here is I'm just looking for anything that shows up in terms of my keywords and exploration. But really, like right here, this is teacher and principal perceptions of authentic leadership, implications for trust, engagement, and intention return. So that has some connection with your organizational commitment aspect. It does touch upon your authentic leadership, but it's looking more so from the perceptions of the teachers. That's another way to think about it too. Since you're exploring the population, you're naturally, what are you interested in terms of the effects of what's happening in the population? Are you looking at their perceptions of their attitudes, or are you looking to basically see what these components are directly affecting the population? So that's another way to conceptually think about it. What do you want to know really from the population? What is the impact of this actual independent variable on this actual dependent variable, or what is the actual the correlation between the actual, in terms of what you're doing, and since trying to figure out what they believe or how they think about this actual issue. So that actually changes the scope of your research a little bit as you're approaching it. Are there any questions about that so far? Or if anybody else feels like they want to kind of get a hint, in the sense that if they're wondering about their population, what direction do they go in?
Well, I was noticing when you entered the search terms, so the system knows, I guess, when you have two words together that aren't and or, that they go together.
Yes, it naturally understands that when you're grouping them in a field, that you're looking at these within the fields. Now, you could easily, if you want to do it for your own benefit, you could put these in parentheses. But like I said, if you want to put each of these in parentheses, the database is only going to understand that I want you to look for all of these first in relationship to that last term. But it understands naturally when you put any term in there that you're looking at, I want you to look at this set of terms and this set of terms and this set of terms. And that's what it's understanding. So you don't necessarily have to be too explicit in the fields, because all it's doing is looking for those actual words anywhere within those concepts. So you're trying to combine them all in the way to where they're related to each other.
Do you notice over time, let's say you took a screenshot of
Mhm.
this, and then you come back a couple of months later, enter the same terms, do you notice the search results being consistent with, or do they change over time?
It depends. This is also part of the research cycle. So how often articles are published or how frequently new things are submitted. It does have some scope on it. If you have a field or a discipline that's very highly active in terms of publishing articles and it's publishing very frequently, a lot of articles around those subjects, you might see more articles that are being added on a more frequent basis. But if the subject itself it's being discussed, it is being discussed, but you're not seeing a lot of frequency of publication. It's just basically by scholars. If they're writing a lot about the topic, or if it's a very I should say, I don't know how the Supreme Court uses it. It's a very ripe basically topic for discussion or things that they want to basically investigate more. Then you'll see more frequent publications about it, and you'll see more things added to it on a more maybe annual or even a semi-annual basis. But if it's like a topic that's been discussed, but it's not it's being published maybe once a year or 2 times, you'll get 3 or 4 articles a year. I mean, people are writing constantly about things, so they're constantly publishing a lot. But I wouldn't actually say, like, if I were to come back maybe not even a year, but I was come back maybe like in 2 months or 3 months, these search results under this same set of terms would change. It may not be 14, it may be 27, or it may be 32. The terms themselves are basically depending upon what those articles, the contributors of those articles who publish them, what keywords they're indexing their articles under. So it's really fully dependent upon how they want their articles to be found. So they give the keywords to the publishers, and they say, I want my article to be found under these keywords. And that's how they basically go about in terms of the database being them being found is really. So, but if they don't give those keywords to the publisher, you have to look at under different terms.
But
so that's why I say you have to kind of be a little bit, well, if it's not showing up, but it doesn't mean it's not there. They might just be using a different term.
But you would expect like these 14 to show
up. Oh yeah,
up
I would expect this to change.
in the future.
This is not static. Oh no, definitely. I would expect like maybe even a month from now, or maybe even 2 months from now, that those results will change.
No, but
these articles don't go away, right? I think that's Marco's.
yes, exactly.
No, the ones that are included in there, they've already been indexed. They've already been indexed by the keywords. So like if I click on any of these articles here, like if I click on this one here, when I say that, these are the subject terms that have been provided, but these are the author supplied keywords. So when you're looking for an actual article, these are all the keywords that they supply for the article, and these are how they want their article to be, how they want it to be looked for. So those terms are not going to change. It's just if there's any other articles that match that, like if there's an article that has student leadership, if you're looking for a student leadership term, that article is going to appear.
So at the same time,
if you're looking, school engagement, then that article is going to appear.
At the same time, if I were to run a search today and then run it in a year, and we wouldn't see a 10-year-old article pop up. That
well, you will still see it pop up, because so long as it's available within the database and you're not limiting the scope of your publication dates. Like if it's a 10-year article and you've kind of like limited your publication date scope, then yeah, it won't show up.
Oh, I got you.
But this is ranging anywhere from 1993 to 2021, meaning under all of these terms that have been listed here, I'm only pulling relevant results from that scope from 93 on. So that gives you kind of like knowing, okay, well, how much was from 93 to 2000, or how much was from 2000 to 2021? Well, you can just easily change that, and you can change your publication date, and you can look at last 10 years or how many results are actually been published in that time period. And that will change your search results. And that brought it down to only 11. So it reduced it by maybe by about at least a good amount, 8 or 9 results. So that's generally how you would limit your scope of your publication. So when you're going to look at, you generally don't want to use things that are too old, but if they have historical relevance, then naturally you want to use that. But if they don't, then well, you want to use things that are a little bit more current, last 5 years, or even possibly even the last 10 years. that are still being discussed. It's just basically where you're kind of locking and thinking how much discussion is being published about the actual topic. But that's generally a good rule of thumb. But that's a really good question. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, man. Thank you very much.
So what I would do here too is think about this in a different way where you're conceptually looking at things. You could even just be more broader, like I had mentioned, and you could just bring in leadership theory and then look for that authentic aspect of the leader. If you just went and you broadened it out to basically bring in leadership theory, or because if you're even looking at any relevant other leadership theories that may have some leadership, like authentic leadership is very similar to transformational leadership. You might want to bring in something along those attitudes, or even charismatic leadership. So we say leadership theory.
Give me a citation.
Let me say leadership. Go leader, or that's the one I'm looking for. So like something like this, like if you go to leadership or leaders or leading or leadership style, if you bring that up, naturally this should go and then this should go back up. And it changes it in a sense of the scope of what you're looking at. So by the sense of one thread of dip in terms of how it's bringing in that whole leadership component, but you still would have to look in the sense, okay, where is it being discussed? How is it being discussed? To what scope is it being discussed? And right here, you can look at these subject terms on this left side here. This is another way to sort through your results that I will mention. You could sort by the source term and you could sort by major heading. When you basically select any of these options, you can say, I only want to look for articles that have those subjects. So if it's bringing in leadership, education, if I want to look at universities and colleges, or if I want to look at teachers, you can bring in all of those different topics that you want to look at and see organizational commitment. Let's see right here, or you can do organizational change. Any of those actual ones that you want to choose, you can try to go ahead and choose, and basically it'll sort your results. So I'm just going to use those for now, but you can always come back and you can change those if you want to. So basically what it'll do is it'll change the scope of your search. Now you have 327, but it tells you all your subject terms that you're using here on the left side. So you pretty much kind of defined and refined your scope of your search a little bit by using the subject terms. That's a good way to do it as well too. Go out a little bit broader and then bring it back in relation to what you're looking at. The leadership theory is kind of, when you do that, it's very fluid in the sense to where it's going to bring in that leadership component. But if you're looking for authenticity, you can look within some of the abstracts to see how is it being discussed. Like this is looking conflict management styles, predictor of organizational commitment in university teachers. Not directly what you're looking in terms of your IV, but it still has some relevance in the sense of what you're showing out that organizational commitment component. So generally, you have some wiggle room. You can play around with your terms because you want to see what's different. If I choose this term, or if I choose this term, or if I change this term to this, what do I get? So like I always tell students, just experiment. You can't break anything in here. You can't do anything. In everything that you can do, you can undo. So it's pretty much up to your own ability to think about, how do I want to think about this? At this point, if you feel like you've identified a good relevant search result or a good relevant working search, you don't want to lose this. You don't want to lose what you have. So there's two things that you could do here. You could change your search results to save basically your articles here in one way. Right here to this share link here, you have the persistent link to the search here. So if I copy this, and I'm going to open another tab, you can paste that somewhere, you can even bookmark it. Anytime you have that link, it's going to replicate the same search. So you don't have to redo your search terms. It's going to basically bring up that same search over and over and over and over. So that's one way to basically do about saving your search. You can basically repeat your search and just have that permalink, and you archive your searches that way. You could also come into this Ebsco platform here, and you can sign in and create a free account. and you can save your searches here. Let me show you how to do that. I have one created here. You could also log in with a Google or a Gmail if you have one. This does not have to be your OLLU username and password. It can be whatever you want, or your own email address. It can be a personal email. It's separate from the OLLU login. So now it shows that I'm signed in. I have my folders there. It says my name's right up there. If I wanted to save this search permanently, I could come to search history. It'll show you all the searches that I ran from the first to the most recent search. And so I could save all of them together, or I could just save one of them. Just depends on what you want to do. So I'm going to save all of them. So I'm going to save searches. And then you make that basically whatever you want. Like you could be authentic leader and an organizational commitment. I recommend doing it this way if you're trying to like archive a lot of your searching, because it just helps you in terms of not having to feel like I have to remember all the terms I used. The databases are remembering for it. The platform's remembering for you. So right here, I'll hit save. I'll save this as a permanent search. And it shows me all the databases I was searching, and then it shows me what the actual search name was. If I hit continue, it's going to save it to a folder here on the left side, say save searches. And all you basically do is go back and you look for your actual search. I have a ton of different searches saved in here because I use them frequently. I actually have 2 authentic leadership organizational commitment. I actually have 3. So I probably put different filters in each of those. So let me put this one. If I come back retrieved, I could come back and I could rerun the search. Notice in this, I think this was a different search that I ran. Notice the terms that I used. I used different organizational commitment. I used effective commitment, normative commitment, or a continuance commitment. Like I said, I looked at the subcomponents of that organizational commitment dynamic, and I actually used those terms as well too. So you can do different, you can search for it in different ways. You can think about it in a different conceptual way, and you can get about to different results. So authentic leadership and factors affecting organizational commitment among the professionals. Does ethical leadership predict follower outcomes among the full range leadership model and authentic leadership organizational commitment perspective? So think about this in terms of don't get too stuck on your terms. Be willing to like kind of change and experiment with some of them. And what I can honestly say, I know we're coming up in our time. I don't want to go longer, but what I want to make sure that I convey to y'all is that if you are getting frustrated or you are feeling like you're hitting the wall and you're not getting exactly what you need, sometimes you have to think about this in a reverse way. You have to come back from where you want to get to and work back to find what you need. And then just set up appointments with myself or my colleague, Kelly Driftmeyer. We'll give you that dedicated time within our sessions to work through your topics and work through your actual individual research focus. We'll look at your populations. We'll look at your independent variable, look at your dependent variable, and say, okay, this is what we can do. This is how we can think about this in a different way. And naturally, I would say is I'm not going to brag, but I have a generally good track record in helping students in this respect. So
very good track record.
I mean, I help a good amount of students on a continual basis right now. I'm working with students right now that are still even getting ready for their final stages of their dissertation. So it's like at every level I'm working with y'all. So it's like if this is a critical point in your actual step of your dissertation, your literature review is very important. So this is definitely something that you want to make sure you're bringing in the most high quality information that you can. And I know Dr. Hinojosa is always supportive of everything that the library has always done and conveys to y'all what y'all can do in a sense to what we're able to provide to you. But I want to basically make sure, and I convey that to y'all, that if y'all need assistance, reach out to us. Let me show you where y'all can book an appointment with us. Basically, off our library's homepage, if you come to this Ask a Librarian link, you can make a research appointment right there. And what I'll do usually in that session is all you have to do is do that form when you basically submit this and tell me, these are the things I'm looking at, this is what I'm trying to figure out, what I'm doing, this is where I'm getting stuck. I can't find anything here, or I'm struggling with finding information in this respect. I'll come back and I'll look at that, and then before we meet, I'll have a little bit of a strategy for how we can approach it, and it'll get you in the right direction. And this is all our libraries that are available to assist. Myself and Kelly are the primary research and instruction librarians, but we also have other librarians on staff that can meet with you and help you. So if I'm not available, usually Kelly's available. If Kelly's not available, we have our other colleagues that are also available as well too. But I try to book as much time as possible. There's some days I have time blocked off because I have meetings or I have things I have to go to, but I try to make my availability as much as possible. But if you see a time on there that you don't see me available, shoot me an email and say, are you willing to, can you meet for an appointment at this time? Or can you meet an appointment at this time? And I'll work with y'all. I'll work with y'all's schedule. I know some of y'all are working and it's tough. So, I mean, I understand that. So I'll definitely meet y'all where it's best for y'all. So with that, Dr. Hinojosa, I don't want to go too long, but I mean, if there's any questions, I can happily take these the last couple of minutes.
Great, Mario, thank you so much. Do you guys have any specific questions for him? Or this was really good?
Can we email ourselves the articles under a specific style, like on the RPA?
What do you mean? Oh, what do you mean? I'm sorry.
Can, like when we find an article, can we email that article to our email ourselves?
Oh yeah, you can. You can download, you can access
Yes.
the full text and then save it on your desktop, email
Yeah.
it to yourself, however you want to do.
Like any of these, basically when you open them, you have PDF full text right here to download. Some of them will have HTML, but usually you can click any of that little icons and it will allow you to download them. And then there's a little icon up here to where you just save.
And actually, Mario, this is why it's so important that where it says log in, that you log in. Because if you don't log in and you're considered a guest, you're not going to
Yes.
find these full texts.
You have to make sure you're fully logged into the site. If you're not logged into the library's website, you're not going to be able to download anything. You have visibility, but you won't be able to really download anything. So you could save the files and it's going to save as many PDFs as you want. You just have to have somewhere where you know you're putting them. But really, in terms of that, yeah, you should have access to everything. And if there is something that we don't have access to, like this interlibrary loan, go ahead and request it. If it's something that you feel that's helpful to you or something that you want, put a get it for me interlibrary loan request. What happens is we'll basically try to find another institution that has that article in its collection, and we'll basically have that article sent to you electronically through email. So that's another way to get access to anything that's not in our current collection. When it says get it for me, that means we can just go ahead and get it for you. We can find it somewhere where we have another institution that has access to it. Opposite thing to that too is you can use other tools like Google Scholar to also see if there's available on a public forum. Like if I wanted to look at this one and check if it is downloadable off of Google Scholar, I could check there first before I put an interlibrary loan request. I have a little button up here in my Google Scholar, so I always copy and paste that. That's a little time saver. I'll give you all a little tip. If y'all have your browsers, add and enable certain extensions. I have like a little Google Scholar extension here. So that helps me in terms of a time saver. And so I could check here and say, oh, this is not available in PDF full text. It has to be requested in the interlibrary loan. I know to go ahead and put that request in. So that's what you basically will come across as you have your search results. You can send a request in or you can download them freely. That's a good question though.
So I have a question. I've done that get it for me before for articles, and they, I mean, they're pretty quick on, y'all are pretty quick on getting us articles, but if it's like a dissertation book, you know, and we want to borrow that and you send that over to us, how long does it take? And then what are the copyright laws when it comes to, like, if I want to make a copy of like their chapter 2 or something, because I want to go, they have kind of this similar stuff to me.
If their dissertation is like well, there's two ways. Like if you look for the dissertation and it wasn't available through ProQuest electronically, Through Procost, if it's available electronically and it's accessible through a database, you have free availability to download that. It's been disseminated in a sense to where it's available for access. So in terms of copyright, you're just not supposed to do anything that you're not supposed to do, really. You're not supposed to, like, make duplications of it and distribute it. But if you're using it for your own personal research, which you are, you can freely copy a sections or take an actual chapter if you need to look at that actual section and use that section to look at, because you're using it for your own personal research. Copyright doesn't preclude you from doing it. It just wants to make sure that you're not doing something that you shouldn't be doing with it. If you're using it for education and research, it's not going to do that. But like if you got a print dissertation, like say we found a dissertation from another institution, you're lending your time that you have for that dissertation. It depends on the institution. So sometimes the institution may want to lend it out for a short amount of time. Sometimes they might want to lend it out for a longer period of time. It really depends. What you can do is you could put the request in. When you put the request in for the dissertation, say, if possible, I would like to see if I could have this for this amount of time. There's notes, there's a note section. And when we put the request in, we'll let the lending libraries know, are you able to fulfill this request? And they might come back and they might say, well, we might be able to do it 10 weeks. We might be able to do 8 weeks. Or we might give one renewal, or we may not give any renewals. It really depends on where we're able to locate it from, but we do our best to try to get it for the longest period of time that we can. But in terms of the shipping time, we have to wait for it for wherever it's coming first. So if it's outside the city, it's usually about at least a good, sometimes 3 to 5 business days, but sometimes it could be up to 5 to 10. But at that point, once we get it, we still have to ship it out to you at your residence. So there's going to be a little bit of a lag time. I would say maybe up 2 weeks, maybe potentially, if we can find it in a very quick amount of time. But it varies.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, the other day I found an article, and the title was in English and the abstract was in English, but then when I started reading, well, I couldn't read it because it was in, no, it was like somewhere from the Middle East.
that happens
There's a way
frequently.
to translate it, because, I mean, the abstract was, it had a lot of the information. I mean, it sounded like the article could help me out, but just couldn't read it.
So what happens with that sometimes is that this happens sometimes for international articles that are published, is that you'll have authors that will supply their abstract in English because they want it to be discoverable, but the actual language of the dissertation is in their actual language. If the author has provided that article or that dissertation or whatever in a different language, and they have a different translated version, then yes, we could probably find that. But if it's not, it's usually along the lines of it. Well, it's in a different language. You would have to use tools like Google Translate and translate pages to get that full translation to see what's available, and then you would still have to hopefully accurately believe that's the correct translation. So I could say honestly, if you see articles like that, the best way, a rule of thumb also too, to do this, and this is something that I know sometimes students don't feel like they want to do or should do, is sometimes it's worthwhile contacting the author. It's asking them, hey, I really like this article of yours. Do you happen to have an English translation of this? And sometimes they might, but they may not submit that for publication. So we can put a request in. We could try to put a request in to find it to see if it has a translated version. But if it doesn't, then the best rule of thumb is to basically contact authors. That's really the only way to do it.
Anybody else have a question for Mario?
Mhm.
All right, Mario, thank you so
Yes.
much. As always, great job. Thank you for your time, Mario.
Yes, thank you so much. And feel free to reach out with any questions. And if you want to make an appointment, like I said, just go through that route. And I look forward to working with all of you on topics. Just know that, this process, you'll just do it over and over. And as you start getting better with it, you'll get you'll feel very comfortable with it. And my job is to get y'all to feel comfortable. So that's what I'm best at. So I'm happy to work with y'all today and in the future. So y'all be safe and y'all have a great Saturday.
Thank
Thank you, likewise. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Take care.